From 1969, that was Jethro Tull with Living in the Past. How does one categorize a band like Jethro Tull? Progressive rock, art rock, straight-up rock, folk, experimental? Well, the music of Ian Anderson and Jethro Tull has been all of these things at one time or another, and often simultaneously. So that music defies classification as far as I'm concerned. Think about those classic albums, Aqualung, Songs from the Wood, A Passion Play, Benefit, Minstrel in the Gallery. I just love this music. And there's a very special event coming up this Wednesday, the 11th, at the NJ Pack in Newark, New Jersey. Ian Anderson presents Jethro Tull, The Rock Opera. Ian has put together an elaborate multimedia show that involves large video screens with characters, costumes, a storyline, the whole works. As you may or may not know, the band Jethro Tull was named after an English agriculturalist from the 1700s. But Jethro Tull, the rock opera, is not exactly the life story of Jethro Tull set to music. We'll let Ian Anderson himself explain all that. We're very honored to have Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull as our guest today. And Ian, was a project like this something you might have envisioned, say, in the early 1970s, but the technology needed to do this kind of stage production didn't exist at the time?
Well, no, I didn't really think about it at all until actually about just over a year ago when I was traveling through Europe on a tour somewhere in Italy, I think, and I was looking out the window, gazing at the farmland and the different kinds of agricultural methodology used in different parts of Europe, and thinking about agriculture and the original Jethro Tull. And since I had an internet connection when I was sitting in the car, I thought I'll look up the old Jethro Tull guy and see what it was he did, and discovered to my astonishment he too had traveled through Europe and picked up some of his ideas from observing the agriculture of different countries, which just set me thinking and looking at a number of songs that suddenly came to my head when I was reading the relatively brief historical information about the life and times of the 18th century English agriculturalist. And then that just kind of got me thinking, well, how many songs do I have that fit elements of his life? And the answer was quite a lot. So within the course of, I don't know, probably about an hour or something of traveling around and looking and researching on the internet, I came up with the thought that I could create a narrative based around various songs, and obviously maybe rewrite things a little bit to better fit the story. And as it turned out, I wrote 5 new short songs to help bring the story into a contemporary context rather than make it a historical story. I thought, let's reimagine Jethro Tull if he was living now or in the near future, and what he might have come up with in the sense of inventions and new technologies.
I have to confess, I know very little about how one syncs to something that's pre-recorded on a screen when you're in a live setting. Is that difficult to pull off?
Well, it's not really very difficult. I mean, the technology's been there to do that sort of thing since, well, I don't know, probably most of my life, really, using sync codes for syncing audio tracks, soundtracks to movies and all the rest of it. I mean, these things have been around for a long, long time in the motion picture industry, and then in recording audio. It's not exactly new, but when you put it into the context of digital recording and the presentation that you can come up with via all of the digital effects and the technologies for performing to a green screen and then putting backgrounds in, that all of that sort of stuff, came about over the last few years. And in the context in which we use it, it's more affordable, practical, transportable than ever before. So we can fit our 2 media servers and all the technology into a couple of suitcases you could check in on United Airlines without fear of being rejected.
Is that something that you like to take a big interest in, or do you leave that kind of work for a team?
I take a big interest in it, but I don't find it interesting. I mean, technology is, stuff you have to learn, and then you have to relearn it, and then relearn it, and then download the latest software, and it's incredibly dreary and boring. And I've just been wrestling with the latest version of the Mac OS X El Capitan, which has completely snookered some of my mail programs and preview and a few other things that don't seem to work properly. So having finally sorted them out during the last 48 hours, I think I'm back to working in my usual way. But no, it's all of that stuff you've got to keep up to date with, and that is dreary. You know, if you do it every day, well, you just make these little changes, and but if you come to it only every 6 months or once a year, then the learning curve is a little steep when you have to catch up with the latest software technology updates and try and get back into that way of thinking. So I don't find it fundamentally enjoyable. It's a pragmatic approach to making music.
When you were constructing the narrative for the Jethro Tull rock opera, you said you went back and discovered that you had songs that would fit that narrative and had to change them in some places. But did you also have an ear out for what an audience would expect to see if they saw you in concert?
Well, I was trying to make it work with a selection of accessible, recognizable, if you like, greatest hits, rather than dig into very obscure pieces of song catalog that many of our fans wouldn't know. So yeah, I wanted to keep it fairly toe tapping and friendly for the more casual fan, but at the same time by giving it some elements of some layers of the onion that you can peel back to look at slightly greater depths of meaning. Then that's all in there as well. But I've always I'm always thinking I've got to keep this essentially something that doesn't demand too much from folks who don't want to make that effort, that intellectual leap to get inside the core of my inner being. Then I'm just going to make it toe-tapping friendly for the casual fan who just wants to come and see a bunch of songs that they're probably already quite familiar with. But having said that, the new material, all the recitatives, those operatic devices that join the songs together that are sung or spoken as links between the songs, those are elements that you have to try to make. You've got to make them look good as well as sound good. You've got to keep people's attention. And having played this particular set in the UK, which was easy enough because most of them speak English, and then taken it to Russia, where they certainly don't speak English, and then to Argentina and Brazil, where basically they don't really understand what I'm singing about anyway. But I know that it works on that level of just keeping people amused, because there's lots of pretty pictures, pretty girl, a couple of good-looking guys, and things are entertaining, even if you're not really going too much into the depth of what's being said or the implications of what's being said. That's I think the art of making any good piece of entertainment. You've got to make it work on more than one level.
You've worked with just a whole group of musicians over the years. There are various lineups with Jethro Tull, the people you're working with now, and you said that you've written some new songs. When you write a new piece of music, or any piece of music, are you writing to the strengths of the people that you're going to be performing those songs with?
Well, I have done in times gone by, knowing that people had a certain style, a certain assets as musicians that meant that you should try and aim your music in that direction, and perhaps tread a little lightly if it was stuff that was out of the comfort zone of certain individuals in the band. So yes, I've been more self-conscious about that in the past, but I honestly don't really have to worry about it with the guys that I've been playing with during these last years, because they're all very broadly educated in music, whether their background is in jazz or in classical music or in rock music. They're very versatile, and they all have a very broad interest in music generally, and the technical skills that they need to be able to play that. So I really don't feel self-conscious at all in writing any music these days. They get their heads around it pretty quickly. But I usually make them demos and send things out in months ahead of time, so they've got plenty of opportunity sitting in dressing rooms, or when they get back to the UK for a few days off, they can go through this stuff and make their little notes and write things down and get well prepared, so that when we come in to rehearse, they already have a pretty good idea of what they're going to play and how they're going to approach that piece of music. So we have a comfortable, easy way of working.
Once again, the show is called Jethro Tull, a rock opera. Ian Anderson is our guest, and the performance, one of only 8 performances in the USA, is taking place this Wednesday in our area at the NJ Pack in Newark, New Jersey, and coming up in just a bit, your chance to win tickets to this show. But Ian, I've noticed that you've charted the progress of putting this elaborate stage show together via YouTube videos, you know, sort of including the fans in the behind-the-scenes process.
I think people are actually interested in that. You know, most people these days have access to a smartphone or a home computer. The technology is more understood, even with people of my generation, than it might have been 10 years ago. So I do think there's an interest in how you put this stuff together. There's no magic. There's no great miracle working. It's pretty much tried and tested technology. But I guess because we are more technological as a species than we were a generation ago, I rather think that people do like to know a little bit about how you put these things together, how they're created, and what the challenges are, and how you might overcome them.
That was my favorite Jethro Tull song, Lick Your Fingers Clean, a song that was recorded in 1972 but went unreleased until the 80s when it showed up on a Jethro Tull 20th anniversary boxed set. And this is the part of the show where I tell my guest today, Ian Anderson, how I became a fan of his music. And it's a sad story. I was working at a bookstore, and I was in the back room working in the stock room, and one of your songs came on the radio, probably Living in the Past or Aqualung, and I cranked it up, and this beautiful, exotic-looking woman poked her head into the stock room and said, "I just love Jethro Tull." Well, that's all I needed to hear. I ran out and bought the boxed set, and I thought, well, this is really going to impress this girl. And she never came back into the store again. But it was a fair trade-off because there were a lot of songs on the box set that echoed my frustrations.
It wouldn't be the first time that the music of Jethro Tull has helped some guy not get the girl. What seems like a good idea in principle very often just doesn't work out that way. And although, to be truthful, over the years, I think we are maybe not unique, but maybe a little unusual amongst rock bands to gaze out on audiences almost from the beginning of our careers and see boy, girl, boy, girl, boy, girl pretty much everywhere we play. And I've always rather liked that. I'm glad that we don't have a male-dominated audience of black T-shirt, fist-waving fans in the way that many rock bands do. I rather like the idea that we appeal to that mixed gender and mixed demographic rather than having a kind of narrow niche of audience types. And it perhaps is a result of playing music which is a little eclectic and draws from many different influences. So hopefully the girls are not entirely put off by our music. They're just put off by the way we look.
I'm reminded of something Roger Daltrey said at a Who show a couple of years ago where he yelled out to the crowd, "Hey, guys, could you bring some girls next time?"
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You see, I would have thought the Who would have had, kind of a moderately good presence of females, but... But we can all imagine that stereotypical sort of heavy metal band that is seemingly playing to an almost overwhelmingly male audience, and I find that kind of autoerotic sort of reaction are a little bit difficult to understand. That men become infatuated with other men wearing very tight trousers and having long hair. It makes me kind of a little bit uncomfortable around the codpiece.
Ian, I want to thank you so much for spending some time with us, and we look forward to seeing Jethro Tull, a rock opera, at the NJ Pack in Newark, New Jersey, this coming Wednesday at 7:30 p.m., and I have a pair of tickets to give out right now. The phone lines are open, 201. And Ian, thanks so much for coming on and spending some time with us, and you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you very much indeed. Good to talk to you. Take care.